President Trump is up and tweeting this morning, responding to a New York Times report that said the FBI investigated whether he was secretly working on behalf of Russia.
Well, the president's up and tweeting. He writes, wow, just learned in the failing New York Times that the corrupt former leaders of the FBI, almost all fired or forced to leave the agency for some very bad reasons, opened up an investigation on me for no reason and with no proof after I fired Lion James Comey, a total sleaze.
Here to react, former White House press secretary and senior advisor and spokesman for America's First Action, Sean Spicer. Sean, welcome this morning.
Good morning, guys.
All right, so what do you think of the fact that it's now come out that they had this investigation and the president's reaction to it?
Well, I think with respect to the president, you never have to worry where he stands. His tweets are pretty clear about his position and what he thinks. But when you read the article, one of the things that I thought was fascinating was that one of the reasons that they so-called based this investigation was off of his interview with NBC News. And yet in the interview that he did with Lester Holt, he literally says, if I fire Comey, it may lengthen the Russia investigation, but it's the right thing to do for the country. There was bipartisan concern about Jim Comey and how he had handled his job, particularly with respect to Hillary Clinton and her emails, his dereliction of duty, reporting it up to then Attorney General Loretta Lynch. I mean, so I think there's a little bit of looking at history through a different perspective now, because the reality is that he was very clear that firing Comey might actually lengthen the investigation, but he believed it was in the best interest of the country. And frankly, I think his thinking was that it was a bipartisan thing, that there was equal concern from Democrats as well as Republicans about how Comey had been conducting himself.
Sean, I've been pointing out that if you actually go into, now, not the headline that grabs your attention, whether or not the president was working on behalf of Russians, but you look down about 12 paragraphs and you see this quote. We'll put it up on the screen for you. It says, no evidence has emerged publicly that Mr. Trump was secretly in contact with or took direction from Russian government officials. So if you knew that there was no evidence here, that there was no findings, then why do they do the headlines? And does it surprise you that suggest otherwise?
Yeah, I think, Griff, the thing that fascinates me is in a town like Washington, D.C., where people's lunch items leak out, every, minutia comes out, that here we are a year and a half later and nothing. And it's the same thing with the Mueller probe. We've got nothing. And every little detail seems to leak out about all of these investigations and inquiries. And yet here we are with another story that basically says, yes, somebody looked into something and they found nothing. And we continue to see that over and over again. And I think at some point people have got to take no for an answer.
Well, your friends in the mainstream media aren't taking no. They really seem to like this. Take a listen.
New York Times report.
Our bombshell breaking news.
It is indeed a bombshell.
This is very explosive.
Yeah.
The tentacles are now leading to the top. Now it's the president of the United States of America.
Sean, in your estimation, is this a bombshell?
Now, I think the funny thing is that there's this sort of group of words that they use. So every couple days he's fuming. Then there's a bombshell report. Then, the walls are closing in. There's a group of phrases that seems to permeate throughout the mainstream media, and they can't do anything else. I mean, you saw this whole thing around the wall where they continue to use the same words to talk about how it's a manufactured crisis. The walls are closing in. Bombshell report. There's a whole litany of vocabulary that the mainstream media has sort of bought into, that every time they talk about this president, something's a crisis, everything's going to hell. But the reality is that when you look at what the president's actually been accomplishing in the direction of this country, whether it's the economy, regulation, some of the stuff that he's done on trade, it's actually not just all good stuff. It's exactly what he said he was going to do. And the thing that's fascinating to me is most politicians, the critique is that they broke their word. They went back on their campaign promises. They didn't fulfill stuff. If you actually look at what this president said in terms of what he laid out on the campaign trail and what he's accomplished, it's spot on.
It's a good
All
point.
right. Thanks, Sean. Thank you very much for joining us today. We shall see how this government shutdown plays out.
At some point, keep calling Wolf saying you got a bombshell and nothing's there. You could lose a lot of credibility.